Hey, Collin.
Hey, Jordan.
Thanks for coming on. This is your second time on, but the first one wasn't released due to technical errors in the software. So glad to have you back on for your first time.
Yeah. We'll make sure not to expose this to like any large magnets or anything. You know, we've really taken some extra precautions this time. So.
Everything's going to be fine. So yeah, today we're going to explore music creation. We're both musicians, and you less recently now, but recently put out a single for your sort of solo project, Substitute Creature. You used to be in a band, Lost Shapes, which I actually use for my theme music for the podcast, which I appreciate and really love that band as well. We'll include a link to them in the podcast notes.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. And Substitute Creature, this new project that you're doing. Well, let's start with just, what started you into music and kind of got the ball rolling on your musical career?
Well, it started with piano lessons when I was like maybe 5 or 6, and I didn't really go very far with it. Just had other interests at that time, and, I think kind of the rigidity of how I was being taught, being that young, just wasn't appealing. I wanted to go out and be distracted by other things, I suppose. And, but then probably when I was, I want to say 10 or 11, my grandpa, who actually passed just about a year ago, he had a lot of my memories with him were him playing his 4-string acoustic guitar. And, he had written dozens of songs in his life and, had these whole songbooks full of things that he had written and just classic folk songs, holiday songs, family songs, whatever. And so he had an old 4-string that he had given to me and like gave me one of those songbooks so I could, learn Jingle Bells or whatever it was at the time and really struggle through that. Ultimately, my goal with guitar, or maybe not ultimately, but originally, was for it just to kind of be a vessel to carry my singing. That was always the kind of main focus, which is funny because definitely the one that I like really had the least, I guess, natural talent for. Maybe the only thing I would say that was natural about it was just the desire to do it. And very strangely enough, like, got to a place where I can more or less accomplish what I want to with my voice. But then, around, I don't know, like in high school, I started playing in bands, and there was this really pivotal moment that had happened where I was in piano class as like a freshman, and there was like a kid who was a junior or senior, and he's like, "Hey man, you said you like Thrice or whatever, like you should come check out my band." Sounded nothing like Thrice, by the way, but I'm glad he did regardless. So he invited me to this house show at his house, and like they did a little fundraiser for them to like go and record, and it was just mind blowing to me, like, holy shit, like you can just do this and you can, like, people will come and maybe even be enthusiastic to some extent, and I was aware of the local scene and whatever, but like to actually be there, living it, breathing it is like a whole different thing. And I got pretty obsessed.
Yeah, that's interesting. It just brings up a memory in me of going to a community center and watching like my first local show as a kid and seeing my older brother's friend's band, and they were doing like a Slipknot cover and their own songs, and I had a cassette tape of their demo, and it's super just like mind blowing of like, oh, you can just do this. Like you can just pick up an instrument and start going for it. That's awesome that you got inspired that way. That definitely just reminded me of that.
It's a pivotal moment for sure. And it's kind of funny because like I've played in from that group, some 4 or so bands with various members of that group. One of which I still play with. And it's just kind of crazy how, you know, one moment like that can pan out a lot of different ways in your life. And yeah, I guess like after high school and really even kind of towards the end, like I decided that I wanted to take music pretty seriously. And as it turns out, that has a pretty constantly evolving meaning, but we'll get to that later, you know?
Yeah.
But I remember not really being able to satisfy my, I guess, taste or vision, perhaps, in the songs that I put together. You know, like I'd have 1 or 2 where it's like, okay, like I like this enough to at least like kind of finish it, you know, or at least get a good rough draft.
Mm.
And, you know, go play it at open mic once and then just like, all right, hell with that.
Yeah.
And, well, so it's like that the trials of that, you know, getting your stage legs, feeling comfortable of being in front of people, but also like the first times or the first several times that you like go and record yourself, especially your voice, it's like, it's horrifying and so devastating. And you have to really like kind of thicken your skin to the sound of your own voice.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. Before you got over tonight, I was actually going through some of my first recordings of playing guitar and singing. And it was horrifying. Just like, oh man, like, yeah, and I still have trouble with my voice. It's a work in progress. And it's been cool even to see your progress through your voice of like the early Lost Shapes days to now of like the control you have over it and being able to really put yourself into it, which was advice you gave me as well of just like finding my voice. And it's cool of like having the musical journey is an evolution of self as well, which I'm sure like any thing that you really put yourself into, it's going to be then a part of your life. But that's where I feel like recordings are so important and such an awesome thing that we're able to do now a lot easier is you have all these bookmarks of where you were at in time and like how you were doing things and how you sounded doing them. And I feel like it kind of ups your evolution to have that as a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's such a intrinsic link, I think, between, I would say most, if not all forms of like creativity and just kind of your own personal growth and progress. There's this really awesome cursive song called Art is Hard. And they got a line about, well, I mean, it's literally the chorus. Like we all know art is hard when we don't know who we are.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that definition is not fixed. It's quite fluid and malleable.
Mm.
So it's like, you're not done doing that either. There's not like one time where it's like, okay, I know enough about myself to, you know, go and kind of like have the right context or whatever for this season of life and to go and kind of capture that, like whether that's in, you know, just the composition of a song or recording it or the performance of it or.
Yeah. It's cool seeing artists who have a long catalog and seeing their evolution. Like I love when somebody shows me a new artist and I get to start at the beginning of their stuff and work through and be like, oh, wow, like I can see what changes they were going through, what they were thinking about, what level of stardom they were at, where were they at in their popularity, and just how all these things play a factor into what we end up creating and putting out there.
Absolutely. It's like, that made me think, it's like those bands who met each other when they're in high school and like still are playing together. It's like, I'm a little envious of that. Obviously, things work out the way that they do for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
But like, that's such a rare thing, and especially to be able to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and keep creating together in like new ways even. Because I've definitely seen like those bands that are around for a long time and it's like, oh, you should have hung it up a while
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting to like, because it's such a I've always thought of music as such another form of my romantic relationship life. Like there's been people that I've played music with where we get done with a jam and I'm like, man, that was no less better than like good sex. Like, like the flow of it, the energy, how you let yourself go into it. And it brings this just euphoric state upon you, like flow state. It's a thing that we all search for, that ultimate presence where nothing else past or future is getting into you. You're just right there in the moment, creating.
Yeah.
And like, it's awesome to find those people. It's such a gift when you find somebody that you're just like, oh man, like because you really have to work with other people when you're in a band or creating with other people like that.
100%. And like, it is that work, I think, that does make it better than like if it was just me. It's like, and in some ways it's easier too. To be fair, like all facts on the table.
Yeah.
Because it's like by yourself, it feels like a big echo chamber of like your own imagination and like trying to pull that out. And like not every idea you have is going to be a good idea. And maybe some of the good ideas you have you don't think they're good ideas. Like you like having feedback and people to like encourage you and like at least give you some like a head nod or something. It just helps. It helps the process.
Yeah. I'm definitely someone that grows through collaboration. I mean, even starting this, I'm like, I see people that do their own shows where they just talk for an hour. And I'm like, how in the hell do you keep flowing? I'm like, I need somebody to bounce off of. Like, that's what inspires me. And being a drummer, I mean, nobody's going to go to a show that's just a drummer unless they're really friggin' groovy. But it's still like, you need it. That is just the base layer. You need something else to just make it different. Because that's kind of the thing I've learned being a drummer too, when I wanted to always do something different. Like, no, dude, you got to learn how to do it like everybody else because you're never going to do it like everybody else. It's still how you play, how you hit it, how you orchestrate it. But if like it took me so long to realize like, oh, dude, learn how to play these beats because there's only so many beats in the world.
Oh, sure, man. I mean, that's the fun thing about it is like, I don't know if you're familiar with the lick. It's like, it's amazing if you just like go on YouTube and like look up the lick, you'll find compilation videos of just like, it's just throughout music. But like the really cool thing about it is all these different players putting their own unique like fingerprint on it, and it's just like, damn, like that's what's so cool about music. It's only so many notes. I mean, particularly in Western music, Eastern music, you got a little bit wider of a spectrum, but, there's just going to be, we're going to play the same chords. We'll probably say the same words. And not only that, but like intentionally or not, there's like tropes in music, I don't know how subconscious or not that is. Like, I love that hook. Tonight. It's always the same. And it's in so many songs. And the funniest thing about it is you can just throw it in at the end of a chorus and it doesn't change the meaning of what you're saying at all.
Yeah. That was so funny. I heard like 8 different songs go through my head. It was like, oh yeah, oh shit.
And I mean, maybe it is kind of like an archetype kind of thing, right? Like we these things seep into our consciousness and it's an expression of that, or maybe some people straight up do it intentionally. I really don't know. Could be a mix of both too.
Yeah. I think that you know, maybe you can't tell all the time, but I feel like you know that music when it's an intentional, I got a feeling. I mean, because it's like, I used to hate music like that. Of like, it's so fake. It's so bullshit. Until I was drunk at a bar with a bunch of friends and that song came on and we were all singing it and dancing. And I was like, oh, that's what this music is written for. Like, it just colors the experience of it. And it's talking about exactly what you're doing. Oh, yeah. It's just like, oh, that's what this is for. Just being out, having fun. And it's like, damn, yeah, tonight's a good night.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. And I don't know, like I saw somebody post on Facebook. It's this idea of like, you know, what is the duty of a musician? And this has kind of been posed in a lot of different ways, but like from my worldview, it's like things are culminating, you know, and it could go a number of ways. A lot of it doesn't look great. But so from that perspective, like, I don't know if like it's more productive or you know, noble of me or whatever to like try, you know, like, do I make my platform about climate change? Do I make these strong political statements and all that stuff? Or am I better off trying to just like provide the boogie down while like the shit burns? And I don't think that's wrong either. You know, like we need that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. And I feel like it comes down to like, what are you really feeling in your heart? And because I get semi-political with my friends, but it's not like, who are you voting for? It's exploring like, oh, what can we do to change things? And it's like, that's what's in my heart about it. You know, my heart isn't in wishing for someone else to change the world. I just try to change it in myself. And exactly, there's so many different ways to approach music, and what's in your heart to sing. You know, I could totally see myself, and even lately, like I grew up playing metal and playing shows where tons of people would walk out when we started, because I was in Iowa doing blast beats and
I thought they would like that out there.
Yeah, not the way we were doing it.
It's you know, like Slipknot, Korn, but not the band. Just lots of corn.
Just lots of yeah, man. It's a place where you'd imagine it would fit. But people, like, I got used to people walking out on us and people not just like, and at that time I loved it. I was like, hell yeah, I'm too brutal for you guys. Like, I don't want you to listen. Get out of here. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, man, I want to like write music that gets people dancing. Like, I want to look out. And I had it from playing a show where it was kind of this like funky band. And I usually play with my eyes closed and I'm just kind of grooving on a beat. And it was my first time really just sitting in the pocket and just doing it. And I was grooving with my body and I opened my eyes and I looked out and the whole audience is grooving with me. Same flow. I was like, oh, whoa. Like I can move the audience. It was like this whole new realization of what I could do behind a drum kit, and kind of reinvigorated me of like, oh man, this is a whole other avenue. Like I don't have to do drum beats that make people smash into each other, which was fun for a long time. But as I've chilled out in my life, it's awesome. I love dancing. Like, man, it'd be so much fun to get people dancing.
Yeah, like it's like that's just one of the better things in life. And if you can like make people do that, like, it's conversely what's like kind of obnoxious is like when you see an artist be like, move, you're not moving enough. It's like, well, make a move.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing. Also, like, it's not how you persuade somebody, man. It's gonna have probably quite the opposite effect.
Yeah.
Even if they want to support you, you're just put them in a weird spot doing that.
Yeah, can't demand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in your musical journey now, we were kind of talking before the podcast about this of like you're going through shifts in your own life and coming to some changes, and what is that? What do you feel that looks like for you, not only in your musical journey, but in how music plays a role in your life?
Well, I mean, that's definitely what I'm trying to determine right now. I mean, I know it'll still be there, obviously, and I think, no, I know like it brings out a certain light in me, I guess. It's kind of a weird way to put it.
No, yeah, I get what you mean, because it's like your inner being shown.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of fun having that up your sleeve, anyways. But I like, in general, I find the chase of constantly playing a lot of shows and the spirit of just playing shows to be just not as rewarding as I once did. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, of course. It's more just like I'm getting older. People I collaborate with are getting older. The people who probably would like my music are getting older, and life's tiring. We all got a lot of stuff going on. And particularly from like kind of more of a like, I'm more of a singer songwriter. So like at least at this juncture, like people I would play with, there's I don't know, you're playing along to something that's already put together. And so I could see how that would be not as exciting to be a part of. And also I just think that I need to be a little bit more creative in using the kind of tools and wonderments of the modern age to like make myself and the people that I work with a lot easier. But as far as like the kind of overarching, sort of like what we were talking about earlier, how there's this direct correlation between where you're at in your life and your art or whatever your creation is. It's been a crazy year or so. I went off to Washington State for 4 or 5 months to go work in the fishing industry, and that didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I mean, I was expecting that to be just kind of a good way to accumulate some funds and, just have a new experience in the process, and ended up being just like mostly a new experience. I just got to kind of hang out on the on the coast of Southern Washington and be out in the forest and eat the incredible, like crazy strong mushrooms that just grow inches from our condos, which is just wild as shit to me. And yeah, I mean, I really actually, that was the first time in a long, long time where I practiced guitar pretty voraciously. And I was really grateful for that time. But, again, didn't really quite work out with the set of expectations I had for it. And don't look back on it negatively, just is what it is. I think the point of expectations is measurement, anything beyond that is kind of counterproductive, I think. But, and then kind of, started doing some construction work over the summer. And like, I think I just so badly wanted to prove to myself that I could like do something other than work in the service industry. And now that's where I'm back at the restaurant that I've been working at for a few years. I mean, probably 4 or so cumulatively. And I mean, at least making the change to front of house. And that's been interesting because being like an angry, fucking kitchen person for a lot of years. Like you kind of get the impression that maybe you aren't cut out to do anything else. And the crazy thing is like, you really lose the context of what you're doing, or it's easy to lose the context of what you're doing back there, because this shit's about the people, you know? And it's like, it gets annoying or whatever. Like, but ultimately you're feeding hungry people. Like, I know I'm like not necessarily the most reasonable or pleasant when I'm really hungry. And like, also like, expect every person who just comes into a restaurant to just like know every single thing about your establishment. You know, like, people need things explained to them. It's fine. I don't know. Point being though, that like, you don't see the human being connected to that like annoying ass order that made your like ticket really long and you have to like pay extra close attention to, you know? And if I was to, in the broader context, like say that person has a lot of allergies or something like that, you know, like it would suck to be in like this big party of like 20 people, but oh, well, enjoy that Caesar salad or whatever. Like can't eat dick here. Like that sucks. and so it's kind of exciting to like be able to like cater to people in that way so that they don't feel alienated and feel like they shouldn't be able to go out or whatever, you know, like point being is that it's like it's a lot easier to kind of have empathy because I'm like right there in that person's face. And it's just like, that's a human being, you know?
Yeah. You don't get that feedback when you're in the back of the house.
Yeah.
You're literally, I mean, you're in like a very closed structure. It's almost like being in a cubicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
but it's hot and there's sharp things and danger and long hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's way more of a dance with your coworkers back there, both because there's hot and sharp things all around, but it's such a timing game, you know? And I think that's definitely like an awesome skill you learn being in an environment like that. Is like, you really got to kind of, you know, put your nose to the grindstone and bust some ass to make things happen.
Yeah.
And it's cool how those kind of skills, again, play into everything you do. Just like, oh, I mean, you know, putting my work ethic into my drum practice. And I've really just been doing it more in the last year because drums were such an outlet. It was like, I just want to jam. I just want to play. But being like, oh, no, like you want to get better, do things that you're not good at and do them for a long time. And it's almost sad to me how much better I've gotten in the last year compared to the previous 10. Just from actually sitting down with the metronome again, watching videos and working on foundational stuff. Like, if there's one piece of advice I could give to up and coming musicians is like, learn the basics, you know, learn all that stuff that builds your foundation. Because for me, why I didn't want to is it felt like it was taking the magic out of it. You know, it was like, oh, well, he's just doing a quad fill. Like, now I know what that is. It's not magic. It's just that. And that's what held me back from it. Maybe some people resonate with that. But the thing is like, once you learn that knowledge, then you're in this like new group of understanding of like, oh, now I know how to implement that.
Sure.
You know, just like learning the difference between jazz chords and, you know, what a flat 7 is. Just like it's new words, you know, it's new vocabulary that you get to bring into your language. And that's something that builds your own expression. Like, I had to really get over the fact that I'm not going to be the best drummer in the world. I'm probably not going to do anything that's like brand new and outstanding that blows people away with my drumming. But if I'm able to play them well and put them into the context of the song well, then I'm a part of creating something new. And that's as good as I could do and as good as I could want it. You know, because I'm still getting my own creative expression out there.
Most certainly. And like I don't know, I'm something I'm really interested in, like actually have always been interested in is like the correlation of like, at what point can I consolidate all of my interests into like one or as few things as possible without sacrificing the quality of any one of those things? Or at least two. I mean, that's going to happen in general. Like, it's not going to be, you have 100% of your focus, right?
Yeah.
So you are dividing it. However, you know, like how far can you push that boundary until like the quality of that thing takes a serious hit? And something I always have to like continuously remind myself is that like, we are not defined by our output. Maybe over time we are, kinda, like in some lucky cases, but I think it's really more the way in which we embody our character as we do whatever the fuck it is that we do. And I'm not necessarily calling the musician. I'm calling the doer of what the fuck ever I'm doing at that particular moment. And I don't know. I mean, I know I'll always gravitate towards creativity, and music's definitely the shoe that feels most comfortable. Just one shoe for some reason. But, you know, like I do like, there are other areas of interest in my life. And I guess where I'm at right now is like, maybe it's time to explore those. And I hope that and suspect that strongly I'll come back to what I've been doing for, in some capacity, for like over 21 years or so, you know?
Yeah, that hits me huge. That's such an interesting of just like embodying yourself. Because like, I've been so focused on output lately.
It's important though.
Yeah. Yeah, very, you know, of like, what do you really, because I wanted to balance the scales of consume versus creation. And it's like, oh, I don't want to just keep taking in and taking in and taking in, because I have a creative heart. You know, that part of me was like, yo, I'm drowning here. Like, give me some air. Let me out, you know, let me do some things. But it's so interesting to be reminded of embodying that in everything you do, so that it's never going to be drowning, because it's who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I mean, I kind of thought I was more preaching to my own personal choir, but I mean, I'm glad that you could get something from that too. It's kind of been a recurring theme in my life, is the idea of identity. You know, what does that actually mean? Not to quote one of the most notorious serial killers of all time, but I think it's fucking interesting as shit. But Ted Bundy said, in America, identity is being anonymous only to yourself. I'm not sure I think I believe it, but I think that's a really fucking interesting take.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so much of who you are is how other people see you. I mean, I've had moments where, you know, I've been depressed and I've gone out and I've literally had a night where all week I was so down on myself and just like, God, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this? And I went out actually to one of your shows, I think at the Bicycle Club, and one of our friends is like, oh, you gotta like come meet these people. And he's like, this is Jordan. He's the greatest. He's such a happy, good dude. And I'm like, bro, stop telling these people that. Like, I'm not a happy person. That's not who I am. But it's like, oh, but that's who I am to people, you know? And I love the idea. I had somebody kind of point this out to me of like, we're different people to all the people that we know, like, and we're different people around all the different people we know. Like, I act differently with different friends because they bring out a certain character of me. You know, it's what we enable in each other. Like, oh, this person I know I can be so silly with. You know? This person I know we're going to get into super deep, wild conversations. And it's like, you get to embody all these different characters in yourself. So like identity is such a fluid thing, which is funny that we're in such a state of like gender fluidity and all of these things.
Sure.
Like I just see it as like the universe continuing to explore all the different ways that it can create.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I don't know. Rules are an interesting thing. I think necessary, you know. It's like you put it earlier, games. And I like looking at it that way because it's like, okay, like this is the music game.
Yeah.
You know, there's this set of literature or whatever that I need to understand, like the raw concepts of how to get through. Right. And it's all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they are just games. You know, and doesn't mean that they're not powerful or irrelevant. But, you know, like it's like my point in that is that let's make some games of our own, you know, and I think there's kind of two types. I'm not the person who pioneered this idea, but I think it's a good one. Is like, you know, are you trying to create finite games or infinite games? And I think that's a pretty worthwhile challenge.
Yeah.
And you'll never know if you did it. That's the funny
thing. Yeah. I mean, being able to like play within the rules is super important. Like that's one thing I've been realizing in my spiritual journey of like, I went to such a spiritual place in my life, being disenfranchised with the world as I saw it. When I learned about tragedy, it was just a very like damning thing to me. You know, I didn't know how to be in the world anymore. I was just like, man, horrible stuff happens here. Like, I don't know if I want to play this game. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And I went into, you know, spiritual journeying and exploring the inner space and, you know, a whole different way of looking at this world that I began to feel like that was more real than this. And when I came back, you know, from all that journeying, I realized like, oh, but this is still where I'm doing even those spiritual journeys is like here in this physical body. And so if I can work in the rules of this game to a point where at least I'm a player, you know, where like, okay, I have a body, it has needs, you know, like how do I fulfill those needs? And how do I fulfill them with greater and greater efficiency that I can then start to curate my life around it to having more time for my own creation, curating my own games, my own rules, both in like how putting on concerts, putting on shows, you know, like being in a band. That's one of the things I realized is I'm like, oh, I'm like curating an experience. Yeah. So what do I want these people to feel? You know, what do I want people to think about when they leave this show? Like I want to make an impact, you know, and that changed completely how I even approach music and how I approach, again, like you were saying, how I embody myself. Like, how do I want to show up in life and what reaction do I want to get? And realizing that all these thoughts that pop up into my head of things I can say and do in the moment, that they have a reaction. And if I really think about it, I can begin to curate the reactions that I want, and not in like some creepy way, but in a way of like, I can show up better in life. You know, I can either realize, hey, there's a party on Friday. These people are going to be there. Man, if I plan ahead of time, I can bring an awesome dish to the party, or I can show up in a way that makes it better. And then I start to own my experience more of how I play a role in this world, you know, that I'm not just some nobody just watching from the sidelines. Like, I'm a player in this fucking game, and I should own that fact. And I hope that I can inspire anyone to own that fact, but more, because you want to get out, you want to go. Like, I promise you, it's so much more worthwhile to like take the chances and do it in a mindful way, but put yourself out there and get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, it's good.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like one of my, somebody I admire, David Bazan, he once said in an interview, it's like, if you want to change, you got to hold up the behaviors you're trying to change up high and in the light for everyone to see. You know, and then conversely, if you don't want to change, you just keep that shit as secret as fucking possible. You lock it away in like, I don't know, like a Russian doll safe situation.
Deeper and deeper.
But yeah, and like something that was kind of presented to me, and I almost want to ask you this. I think you kind of started getting into it, but like, what do you believe? You know, and why I ask that is like you're talking about the ideas and like how that correlates, or I'm sorry, the ideas that you have and how that correlates to the reactions that you want to get. So it's like, and I think maybe that next step is like, so like there's some belief there. And if I may ask, like, what is that for you?
Yeah. So are you asking like, what do I believe in general of like,
what do you believe that you're trying to communicate? In the, like, even just in the context of being in a band and the ideas you have for that and the vision that you have for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's come to a point where it's like, I believe that I exist.
I have my doubts myself sometimes. Yeah. Not about you, but
well, I think when I was, I think back to when I was young and having these moments, and like now I'm dating a person with a 4-year-old and I get to be a little more involved in a younger person's life. And it makes me think of when I was younger, I went through these periods of like, am I the only one? Like, am I creating all of this and all of this is just me? And I notice like when he pushes boundaries and I react a certain way and he looks at me like, what was that about? He's like, he doesn't know how the world's going to react to him yet. And so as I've started to like, as I've had so many experiences that didn't go the way that I wanted or expected them to go, I had to like realize that I was just a drop in this bucket of reality. And I do feel like I'm, in the hippie saying one with all of this. Like, I feel like it all comes from one energy. So believing that I exist kind of, it takes on this role of believing in myself, which as an artist for me has been hard as hell to do. And it's been like the longest game that I've played with myself of like, do I believe that I'm even worthwhile to put myself out there, and to put myself out as a creator. And in taking on this kind of belief structure of believing in myself, if I'm answering your question adequately, it's come to a point of like, asking myself, like, who do I want to be in this world? And working with a life coach recently, we who's going to be a guest coming up, we were exploring like life purpose, and he walked me through this 1.5 hour long conversation and exercise and kept coming back to these questions that I'd come up with the same answer, and towards the last time I answered it, I was like, man, I'm coming up with that same damn answer again. I feel cliche now. And he's like, well, we're here to find your life purpose. And you've had the same answer in all these different ways that I've asked you questions. What do you think your life purpose is? I'm like, oh shit.
That's pretty profound.
Yeah. And what I kept coming back to is like, live fully expressed, like pretty full expression. That's what I want. And to me, living fully expressed also comes with the side of helping other people do that. And it's like the most cliche thing of like, we're all students and we're all teachers. And I literally am like, oh, I'm a student of life. And I want to teach other people to be students of life. So like in that sense, where I'm at in my creative side is trying to bring that out in people, using the magic that is language through the hypnotic magic that is music to inspire other people to live more fully expressed. Because at this point in my life, I can't think of a better way to spend my life's energy.
I'm with that, man. The reason I asked that, I forget the guy's name. But there's like almost kind of 3 levels to conceptualizing something, I think. You know, there's what, which is like obvious. You know, in like this instance, it's a podcast, right?
Mm.
You know, and then how? So like how do you do it? But then that like kind of next level is why.
Mm.
And the reason I ask you is because I'm honestly trying to form that thought myself, you know, ever since it was kind of presented to me. It's like, what do I believe? Because I think what he brought up is that like all of the greatest communicators in the world, all the most impactful thinkers, they didn't really talk about, I mean, they did talk about the other things, the what and the how, but it was more about what they believed.
Mm.
You know, like Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is exactly that.
Mm.
It was him like in some way or another speaking into existence, even if it's just in our imaginations, a vision that he had for what he believed the world can and should be.
Mm.
And I think that's the shit that resonates with people. You know, if I may answer my own question.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for the last few months, but I think given everything I've gone through, you know, like you kind of growing up in a somewhat conservative Christian home, like I grew up, I don't know if you grew up evangelical. I was like half evangelical, half Roman Catholic. Like what a friggin' mess, man. But
yeah, I was Jehovah's Witness for a couple years.
Oh, so. There you go. You didn't have birthdays.
Yeah, no birthdays.
Jesus didn't have a birthday either.
Learned how to be a loner being a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh. Well, that's really something. Yeah. Let me tell you. But, you know, coming from that and like, and I get this, I still hear this from people that I love and respect, you know, but like this idea that you need basically that you need a faith or whatever to be a good person.
Mm. And
in my personal opinion, I think I've become a better person kind of shedding that crap from my life. I'm not saying that's for everybody. You know, that it could be the particular brand that I was raised with or whatever, you know, but like, I believe that like we can be good and decent people no matter where we come from. And it doesn't make it easy. And in fact, I think most people mean well and still yet we all have the capacity to hurt one another in profound fucking ways. But I do believe that, you know, whatever, you know, speaks to you, like whether I even think that you have a good reason for thinking that or not, like it's not up to me. You know, you've lived however many years thinking the way that you have, you know, and so if nothing else, like that's proof, like, hey, like you're surviving. It's the only thing we have to do, by the way. That is the only requirement.
If you want to keep going.
Sure. You know, and if the goal is not that, then yeah, you know, there's a whole slew of options available there too. I'm not advising that, but just saying. All things on the table, you know. I think that's the main thing though, is that like, and not only that, but people can fucking change, you know, like I've held some embarrassing positions in my life. I've said some things that like really I still don't feel comfortable with. I still haven't fully come to terms with like the fact that, you know, past Collin is still a part of present Collin, and present Collin thinks that past Collin like doesn't know shit. And I'm sure that when I look back at this present Collin, I'll think the same fucking thing, you know, like it's crazy things that I like find so detestable. Like I remember being in high school and, this is more my evangelical side coming out this time, but like me and some friends came to school with like some, you know, like real fire and brimstone-y, like white t-shirts with Sharpie, like that were anti-homosexual on the day of silence, like, and trying to be rabble rousers and fucking neckbeard whatever's, you know, and like, man, that was fucking wrong. You know, it was so ill-informed, and like, I would even consider myself like queer, you know, it's like such a projection even. And the whole thing, I don't know, there's a lot of things to say about that, but that's just one example of like, man, like I really did not see the whole fucking picture there. And like, I've done 180s and 360s in my life a number of damn times. And number one, people like should not be faulted for changing and for changing their position. That's a sign of growth. And that's a sign of a willingness to take in new information. But I think that's all I got that I know for sure.
Yeah, I agree 100% in that. There's so many things that come up for me through that is absolutely like, where do I want to start? Like this world is such an interesting journey because there's 7 billion other perspectives than mine. And when people have something change them for the better, they want to share that. Because if it blows your mind, you feel like it's going to blow other people's minds. And there's a positivity to that sharing, you know, it can literally lead people down a whole different path of life, and a very positive one. And there's that weird side of this reality that there's suffering and malevolence, you know, that there's tragedy, you know, there's these horrible things that happen. And, you know, growing up being a religious person, believing in God, and, you know, as like a man in the clouds style of God, that was judging me for masturbating, you know, judging me for the one thing that felt good in my life.
Such a voyeur, am I right?
Yeah. God,
and we're all just unwilling exhibitionists for him, I guess.
Yeah, he's got a real voyeurism kink.
No kink shaming.
Yeah, come on, God. But like, believing in that and then exploring tragedy, like that really pushed me away from religion, where I was just like, my brain could not conceive of like, wait, you're telling me that there's this all-loving God, but he also judges me for the things that I do as I try to be a good person, and I could burn in hell for all eternity because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. and you gave me amnesia in the first place, and you send me to a world where like kids die of cancer and all, people get raped and murdered and genocides happen. I'm like, whoa, that's where I came to the point where I was like, dude, fuck God, and that's who I was when I was a teenager. I was like, fuck that. Like, no way am I being a part of this and supporting that. And as I grew, I got more of a relationship with the entire world, and that the suffering and the tragedy, as horrible as they seem to the human mind, there's still lessons, and there's still these crazy gifts to the minds that aren't feeling them, and even the ones that are, people that come from tragedy and go on to do such amazing things. I can't say that tragedy is a good thing, but quite unbelievably, it leads to good things. And I feel like it's that dance of chaos and order. It is the yin and the yang. One does not exist without the other. Like, it's always going to be there. There's always going to be suffering in this world. I don't think that that's ever going to go away.
No.
And I think that it has to be here to remind us, it's a constant reminder of what life is. And, I definitely feel like now I'm in a more balanced place with something bigger than myself. I do feel like there's more of a story going on here than I am. There's a line in this band, The Ocean, where they say, who made your architect? And it's this idea that like every structure needs an architect. Every complex thing needs somebody who built it. And it's like, so who built the universe? Who built this machine that's running? And then people stop there of like, oh, that's God. But then it's like, well, who built God? And it's like opening up to that fractal side of life again helps me kind of be present here in the now of like, oh, I have no idea what's going on. And I feel like that's truly what I believe. Like, the only belief that I can come down to is that I believe I have no idea what's going on.
I certainly believe I'm not certain of anything forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like such a big thing of what you're saying with like forgiving people and like giving people another chance. And like, especially in the culture that we're in right now of cancel culture and all of this, I understand where all of this comes from. And I feel like it's just battles of power. It's people who feel powerless suddenly getting a taste of what power is. And it's not an easy thing. You want to, now I've got people at my back and I'm going to attack if you use the wrong verbiage or if, you wear a red hat or, name any of the above, easy ways to hurt people's feelings in this world. But it's like, we're just going through times of chaos, and we're going through times of chaos because the order that exists right now is no longer serving what we're creating for the future. The birth of technology, all these changes in how we connect with people that, when I was growing up, I still had a rotary telephone in my house. Yeah. And that now kids are playing video games with people all over the world. Like we're able to see each other in a way that we have not been able to ever, Yeah. And it's changing, and we need this chaos because it leads towards us finding a new way to order things. Bless you.
Pardon me.
A new way of ordering things that is in a better alignment with where we're at.
Most definitely. It's like, I think that adversity gives human existence purpose. Because like I do agree that pain and suffering are going to be a constant, but I don't think that the message there is, and I'm not saying this is what you're trying to communicate, but you know, I certainly grew up with the idea of like, well, that's human nature, so let's not even try.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I feel like the point of like knowing our tendencies is to overcome, right? To have something to build upon. And because like where would we be at if that was the attitude of like, well, that's the way it is, so that's just how it's going to be forever.
Yeah.
It's stupid. Like it makes me think of like the people who are like really trying to like fight for fossil fuels. Because the thing is that like, hey, you realize that like we weren't doing that like not that long ago either.
Yeah.
And the point is like, there's other ideas, you know, they're like trying so desperately to hang on to something that's on its way out. You're going to fucking die with it.
Yeah.
Especially in that case. Like that's never been so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even if it's not climate change, man, like, come on, like spilling a bunch of fucking oil into the ocean or something that we know produces a bunch of noxious fumes. Like, is that really the best alternative that's available? Like, is that what we should keep on investing in as we poison our water and air? Like, fuck that, man.
Yeah.
Like maybe climate change is cycles, but I still think fossil fuels are fucking bullshit and we should move on from that.
Yeah. And pollution for sure.
Like there's no good argument there other than like it has worked. But I think the point is let's keep going, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Innovation like nonstop. Like because we're stuck in cycles and we're always going to be part of these cycles.
Sure.
And that's where I see like suffering will never end. But it's like we have to keep growing and we have to keep changing what it looks like. Because like the world, just like in our own journeys of when we go through these revelations, we're like, I'm a new person and I feel great. And then 6 years later, we're like, oh, shit. Like I fucked up again, you know, like there's always going to be new challenges. But I think where we're at right now is we're so able to see all these things that we're pushed under the rug, and then we just became way too efficient for our own good. Like, you know, you see the pictures of people cutting down these gigantic trees back in the day that were thousands of years old. And a lot of people want to be like, what the hell was wrong with those people? But it's like, dude, they conquered a tree that was that big. Like, that's a moment for humanity. And
contextually, like, I mean, I love the Doug Stanhope thing where he's talking about like, it's like, you know, if we didn't all just go and start popping out a bunch of kids, we could have all been driving on a fleet of Hummers. You know, it's just that there's new information and new challenges that arise. But go on. I'm sorry. I totally cut you off there.
No worries. It leads. So like, we're all still children.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I think we have to continually remind ourselves is we're all still just babies with amnesia that have no fucking idea what we're doing on this planet. But we also need to hold ourselves accountable to our actions. You know, that's where like I hold myself to a higher standard than I did when I was younger. You know, when I don't like to make other people feel bad. That's where like I wanted to save the world when I was younger. And now I want to save myself. And that doesn't mean being selfish.
Yeah.
It means I want to help the people in my circle and I want to help as many people as I can. And I want to be an example of being a good person because that's how I feel I can better own saving the world.
Sure.
You know, because I put it really on my shoulders of like, how can I act better in every moment? And that builds into like taking accountability for myself, it's like I hold you to the same standard, and I hold everyone on this planet to the same standard of like, get your shit together. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, stop polluting so much. Stop. And it's like that we're unfortunately, as a younger generation, we're caught up in the flow of momentum, the tidal wave of momentum. And we came up in a time where we got hyper efficient in creation and creation of bullshit.
Right.
1,000 of trillion trinkets, a trillion trinkets that will come and go. Just whoop, 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 whoop. We get and we throw. There are all these, single use items and all these little things. But I also think that we're constantly innovating to where we're going to find ways to deal with this. Like, I definitely feel hopeful and optimistic. And that's where I don't fault people for being upset right now, because I look at them and I go, I get it. I understand. And I hope that you go out and you do something to make a difference, because it takes all of us.
Oh, yeah.
I
think that's like really important, though. Even if it's just for your own fucking like sanity, is making moves in your life to make the world better. And like, that doesn't mean that you need to go and start, an environmental coalition per se. No, that's a bad idea, but like, I think it's easy and hell, even important to look at the oppressors or whatever, and being like, yeah, like, fuck you. Like, you're really fucking shit up in a way that like the average person can't, even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But like, well, it's like, okay, so like, I think they're greedy, corrupt, dishonest. So it's like, how can I eliminate the greed and corruption and dishonesty in my life? Or whatever it is. Because I think the things that like we hate the most outside of us probably represent something that's either inside of us or close to us that we're trying to distance ourselves from. And that's what projection is.
Yeah.
And man, it's crazy. Like, there really is not a universally good piece of advice. Yeah. We'll go with Bundy again. but like, go tell Ted Bundy, like, hey man, follow your heart. Like, you just really need to like listen to your inner voice. And no, that's horrible fucking advice for somebody like that.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is like, I was just talking to a girlfriend before coming over here, and man, she's really great at putting some shit in perspective for me. I appreciate the fuck out of that. But anyways, like, it's pretty hard for me. Like, I've kind of been jerked around a little bit by some people that like I love in my life recently. I'm not like trying to play the victim here too bad or anything, but like, my point in saying that is I don't feel comfortable. I immediately like am trying to talk myself out of not having a conflict with these people, and for me, like, that is a repetition of a pattern that's been fucking corrosive in my life. Because on some level, it is dishonest. I'm not being real with them, and I'm not being real with myself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think it's hard for me to not just like push that shit down like anytime I have an adverse reaction to somebody, because my immediate thought, like the narrative I have going in my brain is like, you're being childish. You're being immature or whatever. And then the other part of it too is like, I kind of grew up in a way where like I could sit there and try to argue the whole time and get nowhere. Or I could just nod my head and be like, okay. And it's not because I thought that was right, but just because it was just less energy, But unfortunately that becomes a habit, and you carry that shit with you.
Yeah.
And like, I'm really trying to wade through the waters of like, because in another way that I can kind of project in like trying to figure this shit out is like, I might go pick a fight with somebody I shouldn't fucking go pick a fight with. like someone that I think is an idiot on the internet or whatever. There's a million unhealthy ways to go about that. And like, that's the hard thing is like, what really is that inner voice? What is listening to your heart? And it afterwards, always. Going into it, it's a lot more of an art form. Silent H. To like wade through that shit and like, what the fuck is my ego trying to flex on somebody versus like righteous anger or what the fuck ever,
Yeah. Learning how to flex the muscle of speaking your truth is so important. And it's hard to explore at first. Like I've definitely had my trouble of standing up to people and speaking my truth to people because I grew up a loner and that just made me quiet. And then when I started to get friends, I didn't want to rock the boat because I wanted friends. Yeah. So I'd let people get away with saying all sorts of shit. And I got to a point where it started affecting me in very negative ways of like, people taking advantage of me. And I got to a place where I realized like, oh, I'm doing them a disservice too, because they're living in a false reality because they don't realize how I feel about how they treated me. And I'm like, I realized I was kind of taking a lesson from them. I wasn't allowing it's this idea of sometimes karma comes in the form of you.
Yeah.
And again, all these things, like you're saying, it's not something that's like a universal advice that I can give to people because it's a scalpel, Yeah. It's a fine line of how to handle things, but you have to explore it. You have to get dirty and you have to try new things. I try to live my life in a manner that does as little unjust harm as possible.
Yeah.
Like I've learned that I need to be forceful and I need to be able to not be afraid of hurting people's feelings and not be afraid of saying the uncomfortable thing. But I also at least learned love before that. And I learned that I want to always come from a place of love in how I interact with people. And it's been a hard lesson, especially learning things of like people really fucking me over and feeling malevolence of like, oh, damn, that person like really took advantage of me. And that sucks. Like, not only did I lose out on what they fucked me over on, but I feel like I lost out on a friend. And that's hard to come back from. It's been a long journey for me to come back from. And it still is such a personal exploration of how you're going to act in those moments. And if there's any sort of universal advice I could give, it is just attempt to decrease the amount of unjust harm that you cause. Just don't really take into account which part of you is screaming for attention. Is it a part that you want to feed, or is it a part that's like leading you into the darkness and the evil and being that part of the yin yang?
Yeah. Is it the part of me that's just going to fuck off and get some Taco Bell? Or am I going to cook myself a meal that I'll probably enjoy more than anybody else because I spent years learning how to be a cook?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's probably Taco Bell.
Yeah.
It's not Taco Bell because I can't do that anymore, but whatever bullshit. Like filler, not necessarily nutrition.
Yeah.
But filler that I'll put in my mouth hole and corresponding holes and crevices.
Yeah, nutrition for the mind, body, and soul, man. Like it all needs to be taken into account and it all needs to be accounted for both and like in self first, And I feel like a lot of people feel like that's this selfish thing, but it's like, listen, you have to take care of you. You have to, because no one else is going to. And if you don't, it can lead you into some very bad situations. Once you've got you, then you can start taking care of others. And that's where you choose the way you show up in the world.
Oh, yeah. And that's an ongoing thing, too. You know, you're not done taking care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a constant journey. Well, hell yeah, Collin. I think that's a pretty good spot to land.
That is pretty good. Pretty good.
So we kind of delineated away from the musical aspect of this, but I think that was an awesome and worthwhile conversation, and definitely brought some new light to ways of thinking for me. To let people give them a way to get a hold of your musical expression and what you're working on, if you want to just tell people how to find that.
Sure. As far as social media goes, that's all gonna be Subcreate, SUBCREAT. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find all of that stuff, music, online store at substitutecreature.com. And yeah, I've got a couple songs out on just about any streaming platform available. Maybe not if you're like in China or something like that, but I'm not gonna say most of the world. Some like 91 countries or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that pretty much covers things that you can find. I'm hoping to kind of expand the kind of content base there, but yeah, it's an ongoing thing. So
yeah. Heck yeah. Well, it was awesome to have you on today, Collin. I feel like we always have super inspiring conversations.
totally.
Yeah, I always walk away from them just kind of lit up, and yeah, I love exploring through conversation with you. So thanks for coming on.
Always a fun time, man.
Yeah,
My pleasure.
awesome. Bye, Earthlings.
Later, Earthling.